Hello everyone, and welcome to this Uska News Water News video podcast. In November 2016, the first Global Water Stewardship Forum met in Scotland, the Hydro Nation, convened by the Alliance for Water Stewardship. Experts from more than 20 countries met in sunny Edinburgh for 2 full days with representatives from governments, large and small corporations, NGOs, finance and civil society. The forum was designed to advance global understanding and impacts of water stewardship and contribute to the further development of the global AWS Water Stewardship Standard. Uska News reported on the forum, and I had an opportunity to speak to several key participants. Jason Morrison, welcome to Edinburgh. Can you take a moment, please, to tell our viewers what brings you to this gathering this week?
Well, this auspicious occasion of the Global Forum on Water Stewardship is terrific to be a part of. As an organization that was one of 3 founding members of the Alliance for Water Stewardship, and actually where the name the Alliance for Water Stewardship was dubbed at the Pacific Institute's offices in Oakland, California. It's really great to be here now many years later and see how this initiative and global platform has grown up with all of the main players in the water stewardship community coming here to both celebrate and map a course forward for water stewardship.
And tell us about CEO Water Mandate and how its activities dovetail with an event like today.
Sure, the CEO Water Mandate is an organization level commitment platform, and what I mean by that is companies make commitments in 6 areas around water stewardship and then report annually their progress against those 6 commitments. So unlike the AWS, which is a site-based standard, which has got very detailed normative specifications and expectations for companies in implementing water stewardship, it's a much higher level global platform. And we have about 150 companies, many of which are also implementing the AWS standard. So the idea of moving from company global commitments to on-the-ground implementation is where some of this complementarity happens.
And there has been much discussion this week about the scaling challenge around water stewardship. The Water Mandate is a success story that it has the 150 signatories. Are there lessons to be learned from that success, and what are those lessons?
I think there's been recognition within the stewardship community going back a few years now that while our first few years were oriented around defining good practice, putting the sideboards on what we mean by water stewardship, what are some of the central tenets, we did that working with the leading businesses, and inherently what came out of that was a very high bar of achievement to do good stewardship work. About 3 or 4 years ago now, the CEO Water Mandate, understanding this high barrier to entry, realized that we needed to start creating more tools and guidance that would allow companies that are just starting to think about water to be able to take their first steps and increase their water IQ so that over time they have the capacity, internal, and then also the business understanding of why it's imperative ultimately to engage externally through collective action on water issues. But there was a while there where we only had a handful or a few dozen leaders that were ready to do collective action at a watershed scale, and no other businesses in that watershed that were ready to engage that way. And we're convinced that the only way that you can get companies with sufficient capacity to understand the value in engaging and the need to do that, you have to move them along that stewardship progression. And so we have developed a toolbox that we hope can speak to any company, no matter where they are on this maturity progression, and at least get started without being paralyzed by the intimidation factor. Water stewardship.
Sure. And do you detect that that task becoming easier? Is there more of an awareness at C-suite level that water isn't a CSR afterthought, but that water is a business imperative across pretty much every sector?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's a lot of layers to the answer to that. So when companies are dealing with water through their community investment CSR programs, they probably haven't really got this notion that there's a real material risk around water. But most of the companies that have been in the stewardship game know right away that this is a significant and material issue for businesses, and therefore the funding for these types of projects comes out of their operating expenditures and not through their CSR funds. It is getting easier to bring companies along, though, for a number of factors. One is every day in the news you'll hear some new natural catastrophe around drought or huge storm events. And as that plays out, more and more companies realize they've got to pay attention to this issue. And if you look at the long-term trajectory around climate and changes to our precipitation patterns, as companies realize that, they realize that stewardship is their best risk mitigation strategy, and so they're coming on board for that reason. Another reason is that it's getting easier to engage companies because we have more sophisticated sets of tools and guidance to help them along. Whether it's the risk diagnostic tools that you have in the aqueducts and the water risk filters, or whether it's the calculation methodologies to understand impact within a value chain through footprinting, or whether it's the normative guidance around how do you do collective action in a way that has high levels of success and integrity. Those tools have been created, and so it's easier to support companies that are new to this arena. And all of that experience is building on those companies that have pioneered and learned, perhaps in some cases the hard way, how this is hard to do, but we've drawn on those experiences to be able to build these tools in a more robust way.
It's almost counterintuitive, though, isn't it? One can get a little bit of tool shock. Oh my goodness, not another tool. How do you get around that?
Well, I had one conversation with a company in the carbon industry that said, if it's a risk diagnostic tool, the more the better. I would rather triangulate and to really deeply understand, and if they're using different methodologies to characterize the extent and nature of risk, I would want as many tools as possible to really get a handle on it for my company. If it comes to tools that are around the guidance or the normative expectation of what is good practice, what is an expectation of responsible business. If you had conflict, then I think it could be confusing for businesses. But one of the upsides to the stewardship community, unlike the climate community, is that there has been a lot of collaboration to date and a lot of collegiality in developing some of that thinking, so there is coherence, and I don't think what we have is mixed messaging around what good practice looks like.
Well, collaboration's been one of the big words this week. You don't think stakeholders may get confused?
Anyone that's new to a complex arena may be a little overwhelmed. Water's a big topic. It touches on every aspect of our society and our economy. It's linked to food production, energy production, economic livelihood for people. It transcends every aspect of our society. So to think that you could, as a business, walk into the water stewardship arena and understand the different cast of characters and the ecosystem of initiatives is unrealistic. There are nuances and there are different areas where each of these initiatives has core competency and complementarity, and it's going to take the homework of newcomers to be able to understand that. The one area for collaboration where we could be better as a community of practitioners is in this implementation arena, and particularly when you start looking at place-based implementation at the catchment or a national level, and being able to communicate at that level about how these different initiatives work together and play off of each other, then that would be a value add for everybody, and that's something that we could take on. You want me to do that one again? No? Okay.
We'll be okay. And no, but good opportunity to pause, because I'm not sure exactly how to phrase the question and bring up the SDGs. So, can you? This is a water mandate initiative, and you're advising about the development of the SDGs, correct?
Yeah.
Well, why don't we just pause and then you just start talking about that?
So one of the new focus areas for the Sea Water Mandate, given that the Sea Water Mandate is a UN initiative of the Global Compact, which was created 15 years ago or so by the Secretary General Kofi Annan to be the interface between the business community and the UN system. Now that we have the SDGs and the 2030 Development Agenda, the Global Compact as a whole, in its next 4-year plan, the 2020 plan, is orienting all of its corporate sustainability work around the SDGs. And the Sea Water Mandate is doing the same. And one of the key issues that we're trying to shed light on is what are the touch points, and how does corporate water stewardship connect with Goal 6 implementation on water, but other water-related SDGs, of course, and how can the business community be supportive of national governments and subnational governments' efforts to begin planning its program of work around achieving these goals. So the Sea Water Mandate has been partnering with the local networks of the Global Compact. The way the Global Compact is structured is about 85 country-level networks. And we have been partnering with a number of local networks to have dialogues with the business community and the public sector and civil society groups, saying, not rhetorically asking the question, how can businesses help support achievement of Goal 6? And they're fascinating discussions. Some public sector officials are more ready for that conversation than others, but even just indicating the willingness to support to achieve these policy goals is a key aspect of the mandate's work at this point.